Are you using your freedom to spread hope to others? Acts 12 starts by informing us that James, one of Jesus' disciples and a brother of John, has been killed by the sword, presumably because he's out there spreading the good news about Jesus with people. And when King Herod, the ruler over Jerusalem, sees how much this news delights the Jews, he decides to have Peter arrested with the intention of having him held in a public trial shortly after Passover. It's kind of similar to someone else. I bet Peter is terrified. Peter had been there the night that Jesus was arrested. He is probably there when the crowd mocked him and chose Barabbas and said, "Crucify him," to his best friend Jesus. He saw the holes in Jesus' hands and in his feet and knew how brutal the Roman government was with these executions. And yet here he is in a fortified jail, shackled in chains to guards, surrounded by guards, and he's awaiting his fate. Is his time up? I think it's very possible that Peter was struggling to remain hopeful of his future, of the rest of his life, his calling, his ministry here on earth. It seemed like it was coming to an end in a really painful way. And in the same way, you and I, we may not know what it's like to be imprisoned or be on death row, but maybe you've experienced a sense of desperation or of hopelessness, feeling like you're trapped in a troubling situation or dealing with personal tragedy or shackled by the chains of an addiction and you couldn't see a way out of it. You couldn't see a light at the end of the tunnel. You couldn't see a silver lining that could bring you comfort in the midst of that situation. And so I love that in verse 5 it says that while Peter was in prison, the church was earnestly praying to God for him. That word earnestly meaning sincerely and with passionate conviction. Those early believers that made up the body of the church hadn't lost hope and faith for what God could do in that situation. So they continued to pray for him. Spoiler alert, and I won't give away all the details. I hope you read it yourself. God heard those prayers. And God sends an angel to free Peter despite the impossibility of the situation for Peter. Peter doesn't even believe what's happening as the angel's freeing him. He's in shock and disbelief. And in verse 11 and 12, it says that when Peter came to himself and said, "Now I know without a doubt that the Lord sent his angel and rescued me from Herod's clutches and from everything the Jewish people were anticipating." When this had dawned on him, he went to the house of Mary, the mother of John, also called Mark, where many people had gathered and were praying. People are still praying for Peter in that moment. And he shows up at the door and knocks. Now, Peter could have taken this miraculous escape from jail, this newfound freedom, and changed his name, quickly changed his look and appearance, liquidated all of his belongings, and maybe bought a first-class ticket to the Bahamas to start a new life. Maybe not that last part. But instead, he decides to go back to the house of these friends, these family members of his, that early church, to let them know what had happened, to share the good news of what he had experienced so that they would know that their prayers were being heard and answered, that God was in the business of doing miracles, like freeing him from an impossible situation in jail and encouraging them to spread that news to other people. He decides to use this new freedom that he's found to bring fresh hope and faith and encouragement to a world around him that's in need. And so now we make it personal. I don't know what God has freed you from. Maybe you're in the midst of that impossible seeming moment right now. And you're waiting to hear a story of somebody like you who saw no hope and God showed up. Maybe God has shown up for you and freed you from something, but you lack the courage, the boldness to share it with people. You're afraid that maybe people will call you out on that testimony and make you feel ashamed because of it, and so you hide it. Are you willing to share the good news to bring hope to the people around you? I believe there's power in sharing of your story.